My wife Sarah and I were just starting out. You know how it is recently married, buried in student loan debt, and desperately trying to trade our one-bedroom apartment for a piece of the American dream. We wanted a yard. We wanted a garage. We wanted a house that wasn't connected to our neighbor's plumbing. So when we found the house on Maple Drive, we thought it was a miracle. It was a 1970s split level, a bit dated, but it had good bones, as they say. The price, however, wasn't just good. It was criminally low. We asked the realtor, a woman with a smile that was just a little too stiff, what the catch was. She gave a tight little cough. Well, there is a small disclosure. The previous owner, a Mr. Harris, he passed away in the home. He was a bit of a recluse, so he wasn't discovered for some time. My wife and I exchanged a look. How long is some time? Sarah asked. About 3 weeks, the realtor said, then immediately pivoted. But the property has been professionally remediated and cleaned, top to bottom. It's a fantastic opportunity for a young couple. We bought it. A little bad history wasn't enough to scare us away from a 30-year mortgage we could actually afford. The first few weeks were a blur of painting and pulling up shag carpet. The final frontier was the attic. It was just a small, pull-down staircase kind of attic, hot and filled with the smell of old insulation. And Mr. Harris, it turned out, had a very strange hobby. The entire attic was crammed with old audio equipment. We're talking reel-to-reel tape machines, amplifiers, mixers, and thick bundles of cables running everywhere. It was like a Cold War listening post. Geez, I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. Guy must have been paranoid. Or a spy. Or just a really lonely ham radio enthusiast, Sarah offered. We spent a whole weekend hauling it out. Most of the cables, we discovered, were just in the walls. They snaked down into the very framework of the house. We pulled out what we could, capped the rest, and drywalled over the holes, figuring it was dead. The only thing we kept was the old built-in intercom system. It had speakers in the kitchen, the master bedroom, and the living room. It didn't work, but Sarah thought it looked retro. The first weird thing happened about a month later. Sarah was home alone, reading in the living room. She told me later it was dead quiet. Then, from the intercom speaker on the wall, she heard a sound. A soft thump, like someone lightly tapping a microphone. She assumed it was the house settling. Old houses make noise. We dismissed it. A week later, I heard it. I was making coffee in the kitchen, and a burst of sharp, white noise static hissed from the speaker grill. It lasted maybe 2 seconds, then stopped. I walked over and tapped it. Nothing. Honey, I called out, did you do something with the intercom? Sarah was upstairs. What? No. I thought it was broken. It is, I muttered. I went back to the attic, pulled down the stairs, and checked the master unit. It was exactly as we'd left it. A dusty, dead box, completely unplugged from the wall. I went back downstairs, thoroughly confused, and chalked it up to strange electrical feedback in the old wiring. The feedback started to get more specific. Sarah was on the phone with her mom, and I was in the garage. She was complaining about her day, just a normal conversation. I know, Mom, she was saying. I feel like he's not even listening to me half the time. I asked him 3 times to take out A loud click came from the living room speaker. Then a man's voice in a low, breathy whisper. Sarah dropped her phone. She screamed for me. I came running inside, and she was pale, backed against the far wall, pointing at the speaker. It talked to me, she whispered, her voice trembling. Tim, it told me to be quiet. Now I was scared. This wasn't a settling house. I grabbed a screwdriver, pulled the speaker cover off the wall, and yanked the wires out. I did the same in the kitchen and our bedroom. We were both on edge for days, but after I physically disconnected the speakers, the house fell silent. For 1 week, things were normal. We started to relax. We convinced ourselves it was some bizarre, freak electrical event. A neighbor's baby monitor, maybe, or a crossed signal. Then came the night that changed everything. I was working late. Sarah was home alone, trying to fix the guest bathroom's leaky faucet. She's stubborn and loves doing things herself. I was on the phone with her, walking her through it. "Okay," I said. "Did you tighten the packing nut?" "I'm trying," she said, her voice strained. I could hear the clink of a wrench. It's not turning. I give up. This stupid O-ring is probably shot." There was a pause. "Sarah?" I asked. "You still there?" I heard her take a sharp, sudden breath. It sounded like a gasp of terror. "Sarah, what's wrong?" Her voice was barely audible. "Oh my God, Tim, get home. Get home right now." "What happened?" "It's not the O-ring," she whispered, and I could hear her start to cry. "The speaker. The one in the bedroom. You cut the wires, Tim. You cut them." "But I just heard him." "Heard what?" "He laughed," she sobbed. I said, "O-ring," and he laughed. A horrible, raspy laugh. It came from the vent. I broke every speed limit getting home. I found her huddled in the car in the driveway, refusing to go back inside. The police came. They searched the house, top to bottom. The attic, the crawl space. They found nothing. No sign of entry. No one hiding in the walls. They were polite, but you could see it in their eyes. They thought we were crazy. A prank, maybe. After they left, we were alone in the house, feeling like we were losing our minds. "He wasn't just listening, Tim," Sarah said, wrapping her arms around herself. "He was in the house. He had to be." That's when it clicked. The intercom was a decoy. The wires. All those extra wires we couldn't pull out, the ones we drywalled over. I grabbed a hammer and went to the guest bathroom. "Tim, what are you doing?" I didn't answer. I smashed the hammer claw into the wall, right next to the air vent. I ripped away a chunk of drywall. And there it was. Tucked deep inside the wall, taped to a wooden stud, was a small, black, high-fidelity condenser microphone. It wasn't part of the intercom system. It was new. Or at least newer. We went room to room. We found one in our bedroom, hidden inside the smoke detector. We found one in the kitchen, tucked up under the lip of the countertop. The recluse hadn't just been paranoid. He'd been listening to everything. But he was dead. So who was on the other end? I went back to the attic, my heart pounding. I looked at the master control unit, the one I thought was unplugged. The main cable bundle from it didn't just go down into the house. I followed it with my flashlight across the dusty floorboards to the far wall. The wall that connected to the other house. The house of our quiet elderly neighbor, Mr. Henderson, who we'd only ever waved to. The cables, they went right through the firewall. They'd been drilled through. Mr. Harris hadn't been listening. He was the one being listened to. And when he died, the system was still live. The new neighbors us had moved in, and the show just continued. We called the police again, this time with proof of illegal surveillance. This time, they took it seriously. They went next door. We watched from our window as they escorted Mr. Henderson out. A quiet man in his 70s, in a bathrobe. He didn't look confused or angry. He just looked annoyed, bothered. The lead detective came over an hour later, his face grim. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "The man has a setup in his basement. that would make the CIA jealous. He had your entire house wired for sound. He was piping the audio feed directly to speakers in his own home. He was listening to you, like a TV show. But the whispering? Sarah asked. He talked to us. The detective shook his head. That's the part we're still figuring out. He claims he never said a word. He says he just liked to listen. He said the feedback was getting bad, and that sometimes the system talked to itself. My blood ran cold. What do you mean, talk to itself? I asked. His system. It wasn't just speakers. It was a recorder. He had a reel-to-reel machine, just like you found, that was always recording. It was on a 24-hour loop. When he heard you talking about the O-ring, he didn't laugh. He just rewound the tape of your conversation and played it back to you. He was playing with you. Sarah and I just stared at him, the horror of it settling in. But what about the other voice? Sarah asked. The she? The first time it happened? The detective looked down at his notebook. Yeah, we asked him about that. He said that wasn't him. He said he heard it too. He said that's when he knew the previous owner, Mr. Harris, had finally found his old microphones. The ones he'd hidden in the walls 30 years ago, before Mr. Henderson ever started his surveillance. We didn't understand. What are you talking about? Mr. Harris, the detective said. The man who died here, he wasn't the victim. He was the one who put the original system in. He was listening to the Hendersons. Henderson found the wires, got paranoid, and decided to listen back, as he put it. We moved out 6 weeks later, at a massive loss. We couldn't stay. We couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being exhibits in someone else's zoo. But the part I can't get out of my head, the part that still makes me check the vents in my new apartment, is what the detective said last. So, if Mr. Henderson was listening to you, and Mr. Harris was listening to him, who was that third voice? The one who whispered she? The police logged everything into evidence. The tapes, the microphones, the wires. But they never found the source of that first whisper. It wasn't on Henderson's tapes. It wasn't on Harris's. It was just in the feedback, in the walls. And sometimes when it's too quiet in my new place, I swear I can still hear it. That soft thump, like someone on the other side, just checking to see if the mic is on. When you're 10 years old, your world is about 3 blocks wide, and your best friend's house is the center of the universe. For me, that was Mark's house. My house was a boring single-story ranch. Mark's house was a 3-story Victorian monster. It was the kind of house that probably had a name. A place with creaking floors, a dumbwaiter that didn't work, and best of all, an attic. This attic wasn't some little crawl space. It was a full-on 3rd-floor labyrinth. It ran the entire length of the house, a vast, shadowy world of its own. It was a graveyard for forgotten things. Dressmakers' dummies, old steamer trunks, furniture draped in white sheets that looked like sleeping ghosts, and stacks of water-damaged books. The only light came from 2 small circular windows at either end, and a single, bare bulb on a pull chain that barely cut through the gloom. It always smelled like cedar and dust. It was our fortress. And in that fortress, we invented a game. We called it Statue. The rules were simple, but they were scary. One person, the hider, would go up into the attic and find a spot. The other person, the seeker, had to count to 100 in the basement, 2 floors below. Then, the seeker would come up to the attic, pull the string for the light bulb, and stand perfectly still at the top of the stairs, right by the doorway. They became the statue, The hider's job was to make it from their hiding spot, all the way across the attic, and tag the far wall by the window. The statue's job was to catch them moving. If you moved and the statue saw you, you lost. The terror of the game was the silence. As the hider, you had to move in slow motion, holding your breath, trying to blend in with the shadows. You'd use the furniture for cover, sliding behind a sheet-covered sofa or crouching behind a stack of trunks. And as the statue, it was just as bad. You couldn't move your head. You could only stare into the darkness, your eyes straining, trying to tell the difference between a real shadow and a 10-year-old boy in a dark t-shirt. More than once, I'd swear I saw a sheet move, only to realize it was just a draft. We played it all summer. It was our obsession. Until the last time. It was a hot, sticky August afternoon. The attic was suffocating, but we didn't care. It was my turn to be the statue. Mark had already gone up to hide. I finished my count in the cool, damp basement. 100. Ready or not, here I come. I climbed the 2 flights of stairs. The attic door was open, a square of darkness at the top of the landing. I reached in, pulled the chain. The weak, yellow bulb flickered to life, casting those long, familiar shadows. I took my place, hands at my sides, and locked my gaze on the forest of forgotten things. Statue, I whispered. The game was on. Silence. The air was thick and hot. I stared. I listened. I could hear a fly buzzing against one of the far windows. Nothing else. Mark was good at this. I focused, scanning the graveyard, as we called it. Sheet-covered chair. Old wardrobe. A pile of National Geographics from the 1960s. Then I saw it. A flicker of movement. It was way in the back, behind a tall, thin mirror that was leaning against the wall. I saw a flash of a dark t-shirt. I smiled. I had him. He was sloppy today. I see you, Mark. I yelled, breaking my statue pose. Behind the mirror, I win. I expected to hear him groan, "Oh, man," and step out. Instead, I heard a whisper from the complete opposite side of the attic. From my left, near the chimney stack. "No, you don't." My blood turned to ice. My head snapped to the left. There, peeking out from behind a massive rolled-up carpet, was Mark. He had a finger to his lips, his eyes wide. "I'm over here," he whispered. I felt a prickling, cold sensation crawl up my spine. My whole body went rigid. If Mark was there, who was there? I slowly, so slowly, turned my head back toward the mirror. Silence. "Mark," I whispered, my voice shaking. Get over here. Now." Slowly. "Why? Did I win?" He whispered back, starting to creep out. "No, just come here." And then the thing I saw, it moved. It wasn't a flicker this time. It stepped out from behind the mirror. It wasn't a kid. It was a man. He was tall, and so thin he looked like a skeleton. He was wearing old, filthy clothes. His face was pale and slick with sweat, and his hair was long and matted. He just stood there, staring at us. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. I was a statue for real. Mark saw him. He made a small, choked sound. The man looked from me to Mark. He hadn't just been hiding. He'd been playing. He was trying to get to the far wall. He must have been in that attic for God knows how long. Weeks, months, watching us, living off whatever he could find. He took one step toward us, and then another. He wasn't rushing. He was just walking. And then he smiled. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. His teeth were yellow. He slowly raised one long, dirty finger to his lips. "She," he hissed. The sound was like dry leaves scraping on concrete. That broke the spell. I didn't yell. I shrieked. I grabbed Mark's arm, and we didn't use the stairs so much as we fell down them. We tumbled onto the second-floor landing, and I reached up and grabbed the pull cord, slamming the attic door shut. We heard the heavy thud as it sealed. We ran downstairs, screaming for his mom. Mark's dad was home in 5 minutes. He was a big guy, a construction worker. He grabbed a baseball bat from the garage, and we both huddled at the bottom of the stairs, crying as he went up. We heard him pull the door open. We heard him yelling, "Get out! I'm calling the cops! Get out of my house!" We heard his heavy footsteps stomping around up there. We heard him throwing things, the crash of a box, the thud of something heavy turning over. Then silence. "Dad?" Mark called out, his voice trembling. A second later, his dad appeared at the top of the stairs. His face was white. He was still holding the bat. "There's no one up there, boys?" he said, but his voice was strained. He was there. I yelled. He was. Behind the mirror. "I believe you," his dad said, his voice quiet. He came down the stairs. "I believe you. But he's gone." He led us outside and called the police. The police came, and they searched too. They found what Mark's dad had found. In the farthest, darkest corner of the attic, behind a loose panel in the wall, was a small, dark crawl space. We never even knew it existed. Inside, the police found a pile of filthy blankets, a few empty cans of food, and a plastic water bottle. And one other thing. A small, neat pile of our old toys. A few green plastic army men. A one-armed He-Man. Things we hadn't seen in years. Things we thought we'd just lost. He'd been collecting them. Mark's family put a heavy padlock on the attic door that day. But it didn't matter. We never went near it again. His family moved away a month later. They said it was for his dad's job, but I knew the real reason. Mark told me the day before they left that his dad kept hearing noises. Not from the attic, but from inside the walls. I'm 40 years old now. I have my own house. My kids asked me the other day if they could play in our attic. I told them it was off limits. I told them the insulation was bad. I didn't tell them that sometimes, when I'm alone in the house, I still play a game. I stand perfectly still in the hallway, and I just listen, staring at the shadows, just to make sure that they're not staring back. When I graduated from college, I was drowning. I had a fine arts degree, which is basically a very expensive piece of paper that says you're good at colors, and about $60,000 in student loan debt. I was working 2 jobs, one as a barista and one as a hostess, and I was splitting rent on a tiny apartment with 2 other people. My life was a spreadsheet of debt I could never pay off. Then, I got a call from a lawyer in Maine. My great-aunt Laura had passed away. I had to rack my brain to even remember who she was. I'd met her exactly once, at a family funeral when I was 9. She was the black sheep of my grandfather's generation. A woman who never married, never had kids, and lived in the family's ancestral home, all alone. All I remembered was that she wore a lot of dark lace and smelled overpoweringly of mothballs and something sharp, like vinegar. The lawyer's next words they didn't compute. "Ms. Vance, as her closest living relative, you are the sole beneficiary of her estate. You've inherited the house and its contents, free and clear." Just like that. I wasn't just solvent. I was a homeowner. I packed my car and drove for 2 days. The house was magnificent. A 3-story Victorian on the coast with a wraparound porch and a turret. It was old, and the paint was peeling, but it was mine. The lawyer, a stern man named Mr. Graves, met me there to hand over the keys. He was all business. "The house is yours, Chloe," he said, handing me a heavy iron ring of keys. "The taxes are paid up for the year. Her accounts have been settled. There is, however, one unusual condition, a non-negotiable clause in the will." He led me inside, through a dusty foyer and up the main staircase. At the end of the second-floor hallway, there was a single solid-looking door. It was painted a dark, sickly green. Unlike the other doors, this one had a heavy, industrial-grade hasp and a massive brass padlock. "This is the attic door," Mr. Graves said, his tone final. "Per Ms. Ilara's explicit instructions, this door is to remain locked at all times. You are not to open it, ever." I stared at him. "What? Why? What's in there?" She did not specify. She only specified that it remains sealed. "If you breach this clause, the will is nullified, and the house and all assets are forfeited to the state. Do you understand?" "Yeah, sure. No problem," I said. "An attic? I had a whole house. I didn't care about a dusty attic." I took the keys, he left, and I was alone in my new, giant, slightly creepy mansion. The first night, I slept like a rock. The second night, I heard it. It started around 2 a.m., a sound from the ceiling, right above my bedroom. It was a heavy thud, a pause, then a sound like a heavy sack of cement being dragged for 3 feet. Then thud. It was rhythmic. It was deliberate. And it was heavy. Too heavy for a raccoon. Too slow for a squirrel. I pulled the covers over my head, my heart hammering. It was just an old house. Old houses make noise. I told myself that until I fell into a fitful sleep. The next night, it happened again. Thud. Only this time, I was in the living room, reading. The sound wasn't above my bedroom. It was directly above the living room. I froze. I waited. I got up and walked, on tiptoe, into the kitchen. I stood under the kitchen ceiling, holding my breath. A full minute of silence passed. Then, thud. Right above my head. It had followed me. This went on for a week. I was losing my mind. The thud drag sound was my constant companion. It followed me from room to room. When I was in the shower, I'd hear it over the sound of the water drag on the other side of the ceiling, pacing me. I felt hunted. I stopped sleeping on the second floor. I moved a mattress into the downstairs dining room. It didn't matter. The sound just moved with me. I called Mr. Graves frantic. "You have to tell me what's in the attic. There is something in there. It's walking around." His voice was cold as ice. "Ms. Vance, I've heard this before. Your great-aunt Ilara used to call with the same complaints. She called it the settling. It's an old house. It makes noise. If you are unable to abide by the terms of the will, I can begin the forfeiture proceedings." I hung up, shaking with anger and fear. I was trapped. It was either live with the monster in my ceiling or go back to being a penniless barista. I chose the monster. Then came the blizzard. A brutal nor'easter slammed the coast. The temperature plunged to near zero. The wind howled like a living thing. And in the middle of the night, I was woken up by a new sound. Drip. I turned on the light. A dark, ugly circular stain was spreading across the ceiling of the dining room. As I watched, a drop of water hit the floor. A pipe had burst, and the water was coming from above, from the attic. This was it. I had no choice. If I let it go, the whole ceiling would collapse. The house would be ruined. I ran to the toolbox, grabbed a hammer and a crowbar, and ran upstairs. The wind was shrieking, but the thud-drag sound was gone. All I heard was the rush of water. I stood in front of the green door. The padlock looked enormous. I put the crowbar into the hasp and pulled. The old wood splintered, but the hasp held. I hammered at it, crying, screaming at the door. Finally, with a sound like a gunshot, the metal tore free from the wood. The door swung open with a sigh of cold, stale air. I turned on my phone's flashlight and pointed it up the narrow staircase. Hello? Nothing. Just the sound of rushing water. I have to turn off the water. I yelled up into the darkness. I climbed the stairs, my heart in my throat. I was expecting a dark, filthy space filled with insulation, spiders, and a geyser of water. I reached the top, and my flashlight beam cut through the darkness. I wasn't in an attic. I was in a bedroom. It was fully furnished. Carpet, a neatly made bed, a vanity with a yellowed lace doily, a dresser. It was a perfectly preserved room from the 1970s, and it smelled overwhelmingly of mothballs and vinegar, and it was spotless. There was no water, no burst pipe, no leak. I stood there, my mind unable to process what I was seeing. The sound of rushing water. It was gone. It had stopped the second I broke the door. In the far corner of the room, there was a rocking chair. It was facing the wall. As I watched, it started to move, slowly creak. Hello? I whispered. My voice sounded tiny. The rocking stopped. The chair slowly turned around. Sitting in it was an old woman. She was ancient, wrapped in a dark shawl, and her face was a spiderweb of wrinkles. She looked exactly like the photographs I'd seen of my great-aunt Elara, but Elara was dead. The woman stared at me. Her eyes were pale and cloudy. You broke the rules, she whispered. Her voice was like dry paper. Elara said you would. She said you were the curious one. Who? Who are you? I stammered, backing toward the stairs. I'm Agnes, she said. She smiled, a horrifying, toothless grimace. Elara always got the good things. The house, the name. I got the attic. My phone, clutched in my trembling hand, suddenly buzzed. The screen lit up. It was Mr. Graves. I numbly answered it. Ms. Vance? His voice was urgent, panicked. Chloe? I just got an alert. The security system on the house, the one on the attic door, it's been breached. Mr. Graves. Who is Agnes? I asked, my eyes locked on the old woman, who was still smiling at me. There was a long, terrible silence on the other end of the line. Oh God, he finally said. I'm so sorry. I didn't. The family insisted. It was part of the arrangement. Elara had a twin sister, Agnes. She wasn't well. The family, they locked her up there decades ago. Elara was her caretaker. We all just assumed she'd passed away years ago. She's right here, I said, my voice flat. She's been here all this time. Agnes's smile widened. Elara's gone, she whispered, and she began to rock again. Creak. And she can't lock the door anymore. I have to go, I said to the lawyer. I hung up. I backed down the stairs, one by one. Agnes just watched me, her head tilted. But the noise? I asked, my foot hitting the second-floor landing. The thud drag? What was that? Agnes stopped rocking. She looked up at the ceiling above her. Oh, that? She said, as if it were obvious. That's just Mother. She's in the real attic. And she's so very angry, You let me out. I didn't wait to hear more. I ran. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't grab my wallet. I ran out of that house, got in my car, and just drove. I left it all behind. The house, the inheritance, everything. I'm a barista again. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm told the state eventually reclaimed the property. When they went inside, they found the house empty. The green door was wide open, but there was no one in the attic room. No Agnes, but they did find the other attic. The small crawl space above Annie's room. It was sealed, not with a padlock, but from the inside. And that's all for tonight. Remember, the most terrifying monsters are the ones that look just like us. The ones who might even live right next door. If these stories serve as a good reminder to trust your instincts, then show your support and like and subscribe. Hitting that bell means you'll get a warning before the next nightmare begins. Sleep well if you can.